welcome. Today we are going to be covering the second part of TestProject, which is using TestProject for mobile testing. We are going to look at how to set up a mobile device for testing, look at how to create a TestProject mobile test. We're going to record a mobile test with a simulator and a device, and we're going to execute and run the mobile test. There are some tools you'll need to get started. If you are going to use TestProject, you need to install the TestProject agent. So if you haven't done that already, go back to the previous video on TestProject and follow the steps to install the agent. You will also need Android Studio, Eclipse, some Maven dependencies, and Xcode, and an iOS simulator if you're on a Mac. In Java, when we export our mobile test or any of our TestProject tests to code, we're going to need some Java Maven dependencies in order to use these or run this code from Java or from Eclipse. We'll need to make sure we include Selenium Java. We need to get IO Java client and IO TestProject. For mobile testing, when you export your mobile tests, they export to Appium, so you'll need the Appium client. We have not discussed Appium in any of our classes to date, so I'm going to keep this very high level when I discuss Appium, but I will be doing a future presentation on how to set up and run mobile testing with Appium in the future. So let's get started. So the slides for now. First, if you're on a Mac, you need to do a few things to get started. So the first thing you want to do is you want to open up Xcode. So once Xcode loads, if you go under the Xcode option and go to, where is it? Here it is. So Xcode, open developer tools, you want to open up the simulator app. Now, the first time you open this, you want to bookmark it. You want to make sure you either pin it, add it to, create a shortcut to it, or something. Because really, you don't want Xcode open because it's a good memory drain on your device, but you do need the iOS simulator, and this can run separate from Xcode. The other thing you want to do is you're going to want to install, if you're doing Android development, you want to make sure that you install Android Studios. And once you install Android Studios, and you get it running, you need to come down here to the More Action section. If you click that, you want to go to the AVD Manager, and you need to actually start one of your virtual devices for Android. Now, if you have a device kicking around for Android, you can go ahead and plug it into your machine, and TestProject will recognize your device as long as it's a fairly recent device. I found out with the last update that all my devices are so archaic, they won't load because I can't load the latest Android operating system. So unfortunately, running this on device, I won't be able to do today, but I will show you through emulators. The other caveat for running it with device, if you are trying to use iOS and you want to do this on Windows, you will need an Apple developer license. So you will need to register to get an Apple developer ID so that you can actually interact with your device real time through TestProject. So that's the setup. So if you do those first and get your emulators running, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier once you get into TestProject. So now we open up our browser and we log into TestProject. So once we log in, it takes us to our project page where we have our previous examples for Doctor Who and my first test from last presentation. And I have two new tests in here. I have one for iOS and one for Android. So I'm going to put this to the right here. So let's run these. So let's run the iOS. So when I click run, it asks me, okay, which project do I want to run? This one, I called it my first agent. And I currently have iPhone 13 Pro running. So I'll slide down to the bottom here. And for some reason, and I don't know why, TestProject likes to put all your running emulators or your devices at the bottom of the list. So you have to scroll all the way to the bottom to find the one that you want. However, once you find the devices, you can click this and it will show you only the ones that you want to see. All right, so we'll go down, we'll take this guy, click next. One thing that is recommended is that you always override the default input parameters unless you have a data source. And for this simple test, I'm just going to override the input parameters and run with what's in my test. I click run, and while that one's running, I'm going to click run for Android because you can run these in parallel. And as you can see, it sees our Android device. So I will select this one as well and click next. And I will again use the defaults. So while these are running, I'm going to switch over to our monitor so we can see what's going on. So here's our monitor. Our tests are preparing. So iPhone just reset. So it's reset back to default, and so did Android. And as you can see on the Android emulator, it's going to run our default app that we were running in React Native. However, Apple, because I don't have my Apple ID, it's expired, I couldn't deploy our SDK or the API to iPhone. So instead, we're just running a test, testing the Safari app, going through and trying to purchase an iPad Pro. So what you're seeing there on the iPhone is I did a couple slides, sliding back down, and then I'm going to select the 11-inch display, and then I selected gray, and the test completed. So 100%. Now that it's finished, it's going to shut down the agent. Up here is our little monitor. This will tell us what is running. So we have no workers running at the moment. So it just finished, and it's done. So one of the reasons you want to make sure that you reset your device every time you run is when you're running with emulation, one of the things I've noticed a lot is that when the test ends, it doesn't clean up after itself. It just leaves the app or the emulator in the state, like the final state of the test. So that's one thing that it's a little annoying. So if we go into our test, so let's go into our Android test here. Here are the steps that we actually ran. So if I click in here, this is a neat little option with TestProject. So while, yes, we have our emulators here, and we can watch the test run in the emulators, we can also click View Device, and it will open up a screen mirror to our emulator or to our physical device. It just takes it a second to set up mirroring, and then once it's done, we will see the device. This step takes just a second or two. iOS takes a little bit longer. But just before I run this, let's just click through our app. So if we click Menu, Settings, go to Home, you can see this is the full React Native app that I did for our React Native presentation. I just exported it out of React Native into our emulator. So now if I want to run this test, I will click Run. And the very first thing it does is it clears the application data and restarts. And then down here at the bottom, it tells you what it's doing. So we click Notifications, we clicked Home, and it was very quick. Now, if I go to the left here and I click Test, I can actually slow this down. So we can actually see what's going on. So I can go to Slow, and let's save that, and then let's run this again. So we reset the app, go to Notifications, go to Home, go to Menu, go to Settings, go back to Home 1, and done. And we can even slow that down even more. Because as we're testing things, we really want to see what's going on. We want to make sure things are working the way it's supposed to work. Back to Home, and test is done. Now, the trick is, though, once you get done scripting your test, you want to run these as fast as possible so that you can actually run multiple tests and get through as much of a regression as possible. So now if I kick up the fastest and I click Run, this should be almost a lickety-split. Oops, see, it went so fast, it jumped a step. So what's interesting with TestProject is it will try to figure out what went wrong, and it will try to autocorrect itself. So you don't have to constantly go back in and say, oh, okay, that ran too fast, test failed. No, what happens is it goes back and says, oh, I got here, but really I was supposed to be here. So what happened is it self-repaired. So TestProject kind of has that AI logic in it to determine where things kind of went off the rails and maybe goes back and tries to correct itself. And it will tell you when it's doing that. So we realized, okay, maybe running fast was too fast. So let's go back to normal and rerun normal. The other thing we have here is we have adaptive waits. So we can be minimal, patient, very patient. So the adaptive waits, if you think back to our Selenium talks, this is that wait where we can do the implicit or the explicit wait. And if we fail, just like in TestNG and with Selenium, we can take screenshots of our failures so we can see where things went wrong. And if we want, we can turn on the automation assistant. It's on by default. If we turn it off, then it won't try to autocorrect if the test fails or if it jumps ahead. So let's just run this one more time to make sure I didn't break anything. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to save and exit out of that test. So now let's go look at iOS. So iOS is a little different. If we view our device, now you have to have the emulator running if you really want to view the device for testing. You could come up here and actually view the virtual device. However, if you do that, sometimes Xcode and the simulator, sometimes they crosstalk with each other and they get confused. And then one takes ownership over the other, and then you can't really run the test. If that happens, you just have to shut down all the emulators. In a worst case scenario, you would have to come back over here to iOS or to your iPhone, go up to the device, and erase all content and settings. This basically puts it back to a fresh restart. And when you run the test again, it'll reinstall the TestProject agent onto the device, and then it will start over. But as you can see, we're mirroring. So if I actually change something here, if I go back, we will see we go back in the emulator. So we can keep this guy minimized and just work within our browser. Again, for iOS, so we have our name, we have the application we're running. So if I actually had wanted to test the Rest Assured project, I could deploy it here. The problem is, because I don't have that Apple Developer ID, I could not register it to the device. So the device would actually have to be one of the approved devices for testing or simulating a test for a new development app. We can set our execution speeds, our waits, and everything else is the same. We go back over here to steps and we click run. So we start out with our step name. We reset the app. So we're back to home. Everything looks good. We open up Safari. Yep. So I figured, I had to go back and reset the browser. So we're basically scrolling through the main page of the Apple site. I'm swiping up. I click buy iPad, iPad Pro, and I'm going to swipe up again. So see, whoops, can't find it. So taking another look. So what it's doing, what I think it's doing, is it's essentially walking back through the steps to see if one of the previous steps got skipped. And then it determines, well, we're here. That's not where we're supposed to be. So we went a little too fast. So it goes back, figures out where it's supposed to be, and then it runs the step. If the step works, then it continues from there. If it doesn't, and if it's like an ID issue, it scans the elements on the page here that it can find and starts clicking and starts trying to self-repair itself. So it looks like this guy's going to fail because either the site has changed or one of the elements has changed. So really, you don't want to do web page testing on a mobile app to this degree on a site that is totally dependent on maybe Angular or randomly changing constantly because of advertising. Or you'd be very careful on what you select on the page to click on. Some other things we can add some test parameters, we can add some project parameters. We have our locators, so we can look up by ID, XPath, tag name, just like Selenium, like we talked about last time. And you can explore the path. So you can explore the DOM tree of the app and walk through and look at the different things and check out the actions, the validations, the attributes. So none of this has changed from what we talked about last time. It's just the same, except now we're dealing with a mobile app. It's pretty cool. So I like the way they treat this. They treat it just like a DOM, just like a web page, and you're essentially doing the same type of testing with the mobile app that you would with a web page.